you ever wondered what might be hidden behind the walls of a rented house? Some doors should never be opened, and certain Airbnb experiences carry secrets that no one should ever discover. Get ready to hear one of those stories, but I warn you, after hearing it, you'll never look at an Airbnb the same way again. Subscribe to Disturbing Stories, hit like and share this video, if you dare to continue. Story 1, The Arrival. I booked that house on Airbnb without a second thought. After exhausting weeks at work, all I needed was a break from the city, and the pictures promised exactly that. A charming cabin surrounded by trees with a deck overlooking a lake. It seemed too perfect. Maybe I should have suspected something. But at the moment, I could only imagine the peace and silence waiting for me there. The road to the house was long and deserted. As I drove, my cell signal began to waver and the GPS failed in some spots. Nothing unusual, it was to be expected in such a remote area. But the lack of connection brought an unsettling feeling, as if I were drifting farther than planned. The sun was setting when I spotted the entrance to the property. A rusty gate, half fallen, creaking at the slightest touch. The first sign that something was amiss was the silence. A kind of silence that didn't feel natural. There were no birds singing, no rustling leaves in the wind. Just the crunch of my boots crushing the dry leaves at the entrance. And there was the cabin, exactly as in the pictures. Charming, rustic, but there was something about the way it stood among the trees. As if it were waiting for me. I opened the door and a sweet, musty smell hit me. It was the kind of scent you find in places that have been closed for a long time. A mix of damp wood, mold, and old perfume. The air was heavy, almost suffocating. I flicked on the lights and the electricity flickered before stabilizing. I laughed nervously. It must just be an old installation, nothing to worry about. As I explored the house, I noticed details that hadn't been in the photos. A strange collection of mirrors scattered across almost every room. Some small and round, others huge with ornate frames. There was something unsettling about the way they reflected the light. As if the images returned weren't quite the same as the real ones. In the bedroom, the bed was made and a teddy bear rested on the pillows. I found it odd. The owner hadn't mentioned anything about a child having stayed there recently. I put the teddy bear in the closet, trying to ignore the feeling that it seemed out of place. I unloaded my things and decided to prepare for a quiet night. I had a quick meal, collapsed onto the sofa, and turned on the TV, which only displayed static. I chuckled. Of course, with no Wi-Fi and weak signal, there wasn't much to expect. It would just be me in the silence after all. But the silence inside was different from what I'd expected. It was heavier, denser, as if it were waiting for something. As the night wore on, I decided to lie down. But when I turned off the lights, I realized something was wrong. The darkness was total, as if it had swallowed the house whole. And yet, I felt I wasn't alone. The mattress felt firmer than I remembered, and a sense of discomfort crawled across my skin. Then I heard it. The sound was almost imperceptible at first. A light breath, as if someone were lying next to me sharing the pillow. I froze, trying to listen better. There was more. The sound of leaves being crushed, as if someone were walking across the room. And then a light brushing, like fingers gliding along the wall beside the bed. My heart raced. I switched on the lamp instinctively, and the sensation vanished instantly. The house was silent again, and there was no one there. Everything was in its place. But what made me shudder wasn't what I didn't see, but what I felt. Something had passed by me. Something that didn't belong to this world. I tried to shake off the thought, blaming it on fatigue and tension from the past few days. But deep down, I knew. That feeling of presence wasn't in my head. It was real. And worse yet, it seemed satisfied to know I was there. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Every time I neared sleep, I felt that same light breath close to me. Time dragged until finally the clock struck midnight. That's when I noticed. The mirror in the corner of the room looked different. There was something in it I couldn't explain. I got up, feeling a chill run down my spine, and walked over to the mirror. When I looked at my reflection, my blood ran cold. It wasn't me. The face looked like mine, but the eyes belonged to something else. They stared at me, cold and empty, as if lurking, patiently waiting to take something from me. I stepped back, my heart racing, and that's when I saw it. In the reflection behind me, the teddy bear was back on the bed. Story 2. A persistent presence. I tried to convince myself it was just fatigue. My eyes deceiving me, my mind playing tricks after days of accumulated stress. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, taking a deep breath, and when I looked back at the mirror, the teddy bear was still there. The same brown plush, sitting in the same spot on the bed as if it had never been moved. I felt a chill crawl down my spine, and a part of me wanted to run away from there. But where would I go at this time of night? The road was long and deserted, and the house was engulfed in an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow me whole. With no other option, I walked over to the bed, picked up the teddy bear with trembling hands, and threw it back in the closet. The wardrobe creaked as it closed, but the door didn't latch properly, as if the house wanted to tell me that it didn't matter, that the teddy bear would return whenever it pleased. I went back to bed, turned off the lights, and forced myself to lie down. Every muscle in my body was on alert, as if something terrible were about to happen, but I needed to sleep. Fatigue pulled me down, and I finally closed my eyes. That's when I heard it again. At first it was subtle. The same sound of dry leaves being crushed, as if someone were walking around the house. Then, the faint creaking of wood expanding, like the floor of the room was being pressed down by footsteps that shouldn't be there. And then came the sound that nearly stopped my heart, a slow, deep breath from the other side of the room. I turned in bed, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The darkness felt alive, pulsing around me, and in that dim light, something moved. A shadow, low and slender, shifting at the foot of the bed. I tried to focus my eyes, but it was like trying to see through dense fog. All I could make out was the outline of something small, crouching, like a child. I froze. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel its eyes boring into me, observing every breath, every involuntary movement. It didn't need to speak for me to understand. It wasn't a friendly presence. It was something ancient, trapped between this world and the next, and for some reason, I had become its new target. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to convince myself it was all in my imagination. But when I opened them again, the thing was still there, and this time closer. I felt the mattress sink slightly, as if something invisible was climbing onto the bed. The air around me grew heavy, and the breath next to my ear was cold, cutting like winter wind. A primitive fear took hold of me. I jumped out of bed, tripping over my own feet, and ran to the switch. The light flickered a few times before stabilizing, and as the room lit up, everything seemed normal again. Nothing on the bed. No creeping shadows. Just the cruel, mocking silence, as if it were enjoying my terror. I struggled to breathe and went to the window. I needed air, anything to remind me I was still in the real world. But when I opened the curtain, my skin crawled. Outside, on the porch, something was moving. It was the teddy bear, sitting with its back to me, facing the forest. How had it gotten out of the closet? I had no answer. And worse still, there were no footprints or signs of anyone placing it there. It had simply appeared. I shut the curtain quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to get out of that house. It didn't matter if it was night, if the GPS wasn't working. Something terrible was trapped there, and I didn't want to stay to find out what it was. I grabbed my phone, and as expected, there was no signal. I turned on airplane mode and tried to restart the device, but nothing changed. No maps, no contact with the outside world. I was on my own. That's when I heard a laugh. Soft, low, as if coming from the other side of the door. It was the kind of sound a child would make while playing hide and seek, cheerful but with a strange malice behind it. My body froze, and before I could move, the doorknob slowly turned, producing a soft click. The door creaked open, revealing only the dark hallway. There was no one there, but I could feel the presence. As if something were there, waiting for me to cross that invisible line to capture more than just my body, something that wanted my soul. I slammed the door shut, locking it behind me, even though I knew that locks would do nothing against whatever was in that house. My instinct screamed at me to run, but something held me back. As if the house itself were ensnaring me in invisible threads, forcing me to stay for one more minute, one more second. I looked at the bedroom mirror again, expecting to see my distorted reflection. But this time it looked normal, except for one detail. Something was written on the foggy surface of the glass, as if invisible fingers had drawn while I was distracted. "You won't get out." My blood ran cold. The message was clear. I had crossed an invisible line upon entering that house, and now I was trapped. It wasn't just any presence. It was an ancient force, something that existed beyond our understanding. And it wasn't going to let me leave so easily. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to think of a solution, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. I was in a game I didn't understand, and the rules weren't meant for humans. Something wanted me there, and it was willing to wait as long as necessary to break me. Only one thing was certain. I needed to leave before the house took more from me than just my sanity. Story 3. Doors that should not open. I tried to think rationally, but it was impossible. The entire house felt alive, as if every wall, every piece of furniture was conspiring to keep me trapped. The phrase in the mirror still burned in my mind, "You won't leave." It was a warning. And worse, it felt like a promise. I got out of bed, struggling against the paralysis that fear had cast upon me. I walked to the bedroom door and slowly turned the doorknob. The corridor beyond was dark and silent, but something in that darkness seemed alert, as if the very shadow was waiting for my next move. I took a deep breath and stepped out, my skin tingling with each step I took. The wood creaked beneath my feet, and the sound echoed through the empty house, as if warning whatever was hunting me that I was on the move. I didn't know what I was going to find, but one thing was clear. I needed to escape before I got trapped forever. With each step, the corridor seemed to stretch. It was like walking in a nightmare where the distance between you and the end never decreases. The closed doors of the other rooms stared at me like dead eyes, and as much as I wanted to ignore it, I felt an increasing compulsion to open them. A voice in my head whispered, soft and insistent, *, see what's inside. Discover what shouldn't be seen. *. Finally, I stood before the last door. Something inside me knew it was a mistake, but curiosity gnawed at me. My hand, as if it had a mind of its own, reached for the cold doorknob. When I turned it, it yielded with a soft click. The door slowly opened, revealing a small, empty room. At least, that's what I thought at first glance. Then I saw it. In the farthest corner, there was a rocking chair. And in it, a woman sat with long black hair falling over her face. She was motionless, but something about the way her head was tilted seemed wrong, as if her bones had broken and repositioned at an impossible angle. My throat went dry. The air around her was heavy, dense, as if it was sucking the energy out of the environment. She didn't move, but I knew she was aware of my presence, as if she were waiting for me to come closer. And to my horror, my feet began to move on their own, pulling me closer to that macabre figure. The chair began to sway slowly, producing a low, continuous creak. The sound filled the room, and each sway seemed synchronized with the rapid beating of my heart. Then she raised her head, revealing a pale face with no eyes, just two black holes where the sockets should be. Before I could scream or react, her mouth opened in a grotesque smile, and the voice that came from her was not human. It was a mix of whispers and echoes, as if speaking from the depths of a deep well. "You will stay too." I recoiled, stumbling out of the room and slamming the door behind me. My heart felt like it would explode. The whole house trembled as if it had fed off my terror. The floor creaked beneath my feet, and the darkness in the hallway became even denser, almost tangible. I ran for the stairs, but my footsteps echoed as if they were being followed. I didn't look back. I knew that if I did, I would see something I shouldn't. Something that would pull me back into that endless nightmare. I reached the ground floor with my chest burning, struggling to breathe. The front door was right there, just a few meters away, but it felt as distant as the end of a labyrinth. Even so, I ran, each step more desperate than the last. When I finally reached the door, my trembling fingers grasped the doorknob and turned it forcefully. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. It was as if the house had closed in around me, locking all the exits. I pounded on the wood, yanked at the doorknob, but there was no way to open it. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, coming up the stairs. It was as if someone wanted to make sure I heard them, that I knew I was cornered. And somehow, I knew it was the woman from the room. I looked around, searching for any other exit. The large windows in the living room seemed to be my only option. I ran to one and, with all the strength I had left, threw my body against the glass. It gave way, shattering into 1,000 pieces, and I fell onto the porch outside. Pain tore through my shoulder and arms as I got up, but I couldn't stop. I ran along the porch, stumbling in the shadows until I finally reached the front gate. I didn't look back. It didn't matter anymore. I just needed to get out. As I passed through the gate and onto the road, the cold night air wrapped around me like a release. My legs trembled and my body begged for rest, but I wouldn't allow myself to stop. I kept running until I was a safe distance from that cursed house. I looked back only once, and it was enough to leave me breathless. The house stood still, silent, as if nothing had happened. But in the window of the room from which I had just escaped, I saw the silhouette of the woman watching me. Her black eyes, or the absence of them, still seemed to follow me. She wasn't angry. She was waiting. With my heart in my throat, I kept walking, knowing that no matter how much I had physically escaped that house, a part of it was still with me. A cold, persistent feeling that what I encountered there would never leave. And maybe, just maybe, I had never really escaped at all. Have you ever wondered what might be hidden behind the walls of a rental house? Some doors should never be opened, and certain Airbnb experiences carry secrets that no one should ever discover. Get ready to hear one of those stories, but I warn you, after hearing it, you'll never look at a rental the same way again. If you enjoyed what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to Disturbing Stories, share this video, and hit the like button. Activate the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming videos on the channel. If you have the courage to continue.